The new sort of horizon, the new bonanza, the gold rush for hackers has been small and mid-sized businesses, because now it is, even prior to Mythos, the $20 million or the $10 million manufacturing business down the street has basically zero cybersecurity, and those people have been getting ransomware. Your local hospital system that isn't part of the big network is getting ransomware. And so already we have seen that they've been going further and further down to that broader base of the pyramid. And this is just going to continue that.
Welcome to Modern Logic for Your Business with myself, Andy Ron, and I'm here today again, as usual, with Dustin Bruznak. Today, we're going to talk about the new model that was just announced by Anthropic called, what is it? Megalith? Monolith? Uberbrain?
Mythos.
Mythos. Yes.
Yeah. Mythos.
Pretty exciting stuff. Also, we talk about what does it mean to manage and run a development team in the age of the AI-enabled developer? And really, what does that mean for all of knowledge work going into the future? So stay tuned. I wanted to talk about what does it mean to be a software development team? Because in the age of AI, everything's changing. But in the meantime, this announcement from Anthropic this week just dropped. They teased us about their new model called Mythos. And I'm sorry, I'm so dense. I just now figured out that the names of their models are related to the length of written words. So haiku, that's a 3-line poem. That's their little one. And then sonnet is a 12 or 14-line poem. That's the next one. And then opus, that's like a whole novel. And now here comes Mythos. So that would be like all the volumes of all the opuses.
Right.
But they didn't release it. And I'm like, what? It's too powerful. And that's got to be marketing blather,
they
right?
teased us and then they yanked it away. We all want to use it.
It's probably not ready is what I'm thinking. Yeah, it's too powerful. But actually, what's this? Project Glasswing?
So they basically gave it to a handful of very high profile companies, because what they found, so first of all, a little bit about the model. It is the first 10 trillion parameter model. And to put that in perspective, Opus 4.6, the model that everyone has been raving about for the last 3 months, really revolutionized how we think about using these things at work, is between 800 billion and 1.2 trillion parameter model. And so that parameters is a rough way to think of the size. So this thing, you can roughly equate it to 10 times better than the already existing state of the art that they had.
I mean,
and when they turned this on, they realized, whoa, this thing can find security holes in basically anything you point it at. And if they released it to the general public, their fear, which turns out to be legitimate when you go look at what security researchers are saying, is that the entire cybersecurity infrastructure on the planet will fail. And I actually read an article that said that Mythos is I forget who wrote this, but the beginning of the end of cybersecurity.
It might be it's both the cause and effect here, because a lot of infrastructure for computers and the internet are open source projects. And the thinking there was not only to get collaboration amongst people who share these tools, let's improve them together, but also you would have a more secure environment if everyone could look and criticize and analyze that code and look for weaknesses. There would no longer be secret bugs only available behind closed doors. But once an exploit was found, like, it would all be hush hush. But the problem with open source, when you have innovations in this age of AI that are such amazing leaps forward, is there's no time to react to the capabilities of these tools to look at that open source software and be like, hey, you know what? If you take advantage of this little tiny, seemingly inconsequential bug here, and this one here, and this one here, the three together, it's able to piece together really meaningful exploits. And what was jaw jaw-dropping about this is they did not train it to do that. The model was able to figure out how to do this kind of penetration testing on its own. And
And it found some high profile
oh yeah,
bugs in software that has
yeah.
been that has had millions of eyeballs on it,
It,
sometimes for decades.
so
Right.
one OpenBSD is an alternative to Linux, and their ethos has always been we are way more secure. They've always been very diligent and careful. They don't just add extra packages, being more software code that could destabilize it. The architecture, the kernel is very secure. Like all the way drivers are put together. It's like their idea was nobody's getting into the system. Mythos found a 27-year-old security bug hiding in OpenBSD source code. And it's a bug that's been there since 1998. And as far as we know, no one's ever exploited that. But it's mind-blowing to think a state actor, like someone like US or China or something, potentially could
Could
have
have been
found that years
exploiting
ago.
this for
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah.
And if so, Anthropic did, I think, what is really the right thing, which is they went to, I didn't read the whole list of people they give it to, but I imagine it's companies like Microsoft in the security
I
department,
saw
and
Microsoft,
said
Apple,
it
Linux
basically said,
Foundation.
here, we're going to
Yep.
give you access to this through this Project Glasswing, and we are going to give you some period of time to harden your infrastructure so that we don't give, say, Russian bad actors or Chinese bad actors or access to this device before we have an opportunity to harden the infrastructure. But I think the other piece of this is the cybersecurity world we have lived in is about to get a whole lot hotter. The climate is going to change. And one of the things that we know in cybersecurity is the vast majority of exploits on most of the things that you hear about that hit the news are because some old system didn't get patched. It's not because of what we call 0-day, which is an exploit that basically we found a brand new in the field exploit and exploited a brand new system. It's because these companies don't do a good job patching and updating. And we've had time, sometimes a week, depending on how big your profile surface is, sometimes years to patch those legacy systems. And there are companies that patch weekly, there are companies that patch daily, there's companies that patch once a year or never. And that has been, you have been protected because you are small or because you don't present a big surface area. And now that we've got these sort of more automated exploit tools that are intelligent, like AI, like Mythos, what we're going to see is that the cost of exploiting smaller companies, smaller surface areas is going to go down, which means we're going to see a lot more exploits. Even if Microsoft and all of the big vendors through Project Glasswing patch everything, there's still going to be millions of machines
Yeah. I mean,
running this
my
old
real,
stuff.
if you don't have a way of continually patching your internet enabled devices, those things are going to have to be shut off. And it could be
Yeah.
routers, it could be your vacuum cleaner, your smart refrigerator, or your WordPress website, or like the Windows machine that runs the CAT scan at the hospital. All of those systems need to be doing patches applied at least weekly through vendors that are still active and running this Mythos code and finding the vulnerabilities and patching them. And sure, if you're mainstream Apple, you just bought an iPhone 18, Apple's going to patch that. It'll be an update. It'll be fine. But if you're on an iPhone 10 still or something,
Yeah.
is Apple going to release new versions of iOS 17 and 16 for those old devices? Maybe, but I doubt it. And Apple's one of the best vendors when it comes to doing that. You think about all those Chromebooks and old Samsung Android phones, all of that stuff is now going to be ripe for the taking from any
Exploitation.
exploit actor. And I don't know
Yeah.
what we do about it other than we just put all that stuff in the landfill because
And
it'll all
I,
be
I
turned
think
against
we
us.
I think we have to, the most we can do is get knowledgeable about it and educate people. And this has actually been a problem prior to even AI. Our friends in IT, which IT lives in a, we're in information systems, it's a layer that lives on top of IT. IT is more like your devices, your what they call your endpoints, your mobile phones, your computers. And my friends in IT have had basically what they tell me is even now today, they have to largely come in and clean up after someone is exploited because very few people are investing before they get hacked. And the number of people, smaller and smaller, the new sort of horizon, the new bonanza, the gold rush for hackers has been small and mid-sized businesses. Because now it is, even prior to Mythos, the $20 million or the $10 million manufacturing business down the street has basically zero cybersecurity, and those people have been getting ransomware. Your local hospital system that isn't part of the big network is getting
Yeah.
ransomware. And so already we have seen that they've been going further and further down to that broader base of the
Mhm.
pyramid. And this is just going to continue that. And
And if
I do think Anthropic is doing about the best they can by giving people early access to these
right, but at some
models.
point to recoup what did it cost them $20 billion to create this model? They're gonna have to start selling it to folks. And the
Yeah.
hackers are gonna have access to it, maybe not this week or next month, but soon. And they
Yeah.
will start figuring out ways to get into all those systems. And the problem is now every single thing is a way in. Your flipping smart light bulb. I know that Philips makes a light bulb. You can control it with your iPhone.
Yeah.
How does that work? What software is that light bulb running? Is Mythos going to find a vulnerability that lets you get into someone's corporate IT network because of a light bulb? You might be laughing, but I think it's actually possible
Oh
that
yeah.
as
The
simple
Internet
as a
of
light
Things
bulb
is
could be the way in.
the Internet of Things is like people's Ring cameras, for example. They've provided because what they do is they hop into that and then they hop through that to the other
Right.
machines on your network. And those of us who have smart appliances, like I'm dumb, I bought a smart fridge because I like having the
Sure.
big
Yeah.
LED panel. I don't use it. It's stupid. I just like technology. But it's just sitting there and
Is it
I've
getting
not
patched?
I don't think about when I patch it. And
I wouldn't
the
even know how
crew,
to
even the
patch it.
people who build the software for it, they're not like cybersecurity experts
No.
that they're writing fridge software. They're
Well, and
not
also
like
like
the top of
they're
the industry. It's fine, but it's not the best software in the world either.
no, they
Like I
probably
imagine that
outsourced
team
it
is
honestly
underfunded,
because
underfunded. There's probably two guys that or gals that manage it. It's
yeah.
one of 10 projects they work on, right?
But also, what's the revenue basis to keep them working on that? They sold that fridge to you one time 5 years ago. It's
Yeah.
not like that one time payment can afford to keep a team of engineers continuously working to update the software. They thought they were done.
Yeah.
And this is part of why software industry loves the subscription model, which all of us as consumers hate. But the fact is, all of these things that have computers in them will need continual work, especially right now. I have an iRobot vacuum cleaner, and they were going through bankruptcy. And I think maybe they've been purchased by one of their creditors. But is any one of the engineering team who worked there still employed? Is my robot vacuum cleaner going to become taken over and start maliciously
Trying to
driving
kill you in
around
the
in the
middle of
night
the
to try to get me? I don't
night.
know what it's going to do. It has a
What
camera
it'll
on it. I
do is it'll
suppose.
sit there quietly, and any device you bring close to it is gonna be
Right.
exposed to whatever the hacker is. But I do like the idea of it's in the middle of the night digging through your kitchen drawers looking for a knife because it's evocative of the
Yeah, no,
sci-fi
it'll
element.
just
But the
drive over and
reality is
park in front of the bathroom door, and I'll trip on it. That's what its big master plan is.
The reality is most people that have been hacked don't realize they've been hacked because you're just providing compute to a bot swarm that is being
Or
used
it's
a target that
right,
has
it's
more money than you.
a stepping stone to some valuable target that can be ransomware.
Or they
You
wait
know,
until they get onto a computer and you log into your bank account and I mean
yep,
if
and then
they
they
and
could try to steal funds or identity theft. And of course, they're getting more and more sophisticated. It used to be like they would take all the money out of your bank account, and you'd notice because the check would
yeah.
bounce, and then a lot of that would get reversed. And so now they'll take just a little bit each month and you don't notice, but they've hacked everyone in the system. So all the counts together, they're making bank, or
Yeah.
they'll just get more and more
So
devious.
Mythos, the security implications are front and center. I do think there's some other really interesting things about it that make it really exciting. Apparently, it is an incredible coding platform, like far better than 4.6, which has already replaced, has between that and Codex, the models in the last 3 months have my understanding, has completely changed the way you do your job. And so imagine
Yeah.
having a tool that is 10 times better than that, or that
Well,
is, or at least significantly,
I
so significantly that people are calling it that it's a new moment, like when OpenAI first released ChatGPT. That's how I've seen people referring to it.
people always love to make these things seem cooler than they are. Like we talked about GPT 5.4 when it came out with similar high praise, and now that it's been out for a few months, I don't know.
It hasn't
Is
really.
it
I
is
think
it
5.4 is a great model, but 4.6 Opus is just so much better that everyone's talking more about Opus and Claude
yeah.
Coworker, and they basically got scooped. I think if Opus hadn't come out, we'd all be raving probably about 5.4. But I think the other thing that when I go and use all the different models, like the Anthropic model understands to some degree in its own way of understanding how to do work. And I feel like when I deal with ChatGPT, the feeling I get, and maybe this is just me, is that I'm working with a really smart calculator. And when I'm working with Opus, it's more like having a junior employee, right? It's more proactive, and in some ways, it's just more helpful. And I think when you look at the market Sam was going after and the market that Anthropic is really focusing on supporting enterprise workflows. And that shows in their model training. And you can
Mhm.
feel it when you use the models. It's just they are way ahead in the little things, like how do you provide it context about your company? How do you give it
Yeah.
skills and tools to do things? And ChatGPT still hard to add skills. There's no drop down to add a skill to ChatGPT that I'm aware of.
I mean,
There's
you can
no,
add skills to Codex, which is their command line coding tool.
yeah.
From my perspective, in terms of using Codex or Claude on the command line, they seem similar, but I think that's also because I don't know if it's shocking or sad, but they already are like at the 80% mark in terms of being able to just do what I'm asking of them. And so in terms of coding, we're no longer going to see like it's 10 times better at coding. I don't think so. Sorry. There's nowhere to go. It already can do it.
Well, even if it were 10 times better, what does that mean?
What does
Because
that
we're
mean?
already
Like
doing most of our
if
coding
you
with
ask
it.
something to do something
Like,
and it does it, what is 10 times better than doing what you asked for?
and
You can't
and
do
this
better
gets
than
at
doing what I
our
asked for.
when we had the environmental conversation, I can't even remember when, it was many podcasts ago now. We've done a lot of
Yeah.
these, shockingly.
Yeah.
We talked about how the models would reach a level that was good enough. And so
Mhm.
our worry about ongoing ecological impacts was lower than, say, your average person, because despite the news, the reality is most people aren't going to have to notch up to the $20 billion model, the Mythos model, to get their day job done. They're going to be able to run
Yeah.
on the model on 4.6 that is going to continue to get more and more efficient. Just like you don't upgrade to the latest, greatest Windows anymore, or the
Or the latest
latest
greatest
greatest
iPhone
Office
or
suite or
yeah.
iPhone, because I don't even know what iPhone I have, but it's 3, 4 generations behind, and it's still great. I don't
Yeah.
need another iPhone, right? If I get a new iPhone, what does it have? A little bit better camera, like that. It's in similar. I think we're going to see that this you're going to be able to opt into a more expensive model to do more expensive types of work. So I could see, for instance, something that was better at coding being useful if you were going to build a much larger, much more sophisticated system.
Or if you're coming into a legacy system with just enormous amounts of badly structured code that's very hard to
Yeah.
puzzle through, like you
So
might
it's going to be
need
able to do
a
harder
larger
work
model. So
that
part of me
requires
is
more
like,
context and more.
that's just an environment that needs someone with AI to try to break that problem down. Like if it has
Right.
poor separation of concerns, which is one of those principles of software development from forever ago, then yeah, it's going to be hard to reason about because every file affects every part of the system. But what might be possible is instead of saying, oh, we have to use Mythos on this code base, is you might use something like Mythos to be like, can you break this big mess into well factored, isolated components that are independent and testable? And then Opus can deal with each of those components individually
Right.
because they will have their own worlds they operate in.
And I think we're going
So
to see that multimodal workflow as well, where people are using
yeah,
different models to accomplish different things. And
sure.
You might have Mythos basically breaking out a workload, and Opus writing the code, and then a human
Or building the
basically
plan,
controlling it. Right. The
you know,
plan mode is in
the
Mythos.
could be. Yeah. So there, and then you fork out. In fact, there was some like leaks of, I think we talked last week about Claude Code leak. But one of the things they discovered is that already Claude Code, when it's doing its agentic planning and so forth, will sometimes do some of those tasks on the
Cheaper
Haiku
model.
or Sonnet models
Yeah.
because it's a very easy task and they don't need to run everything through Opus.
And
So
internally they're trying to save compute.
yeah,
And yeah, because yeah, and so I think that is an interesting segue into what we actually wanted to talk about, although we've spent 20 minutes talking about
yeah,
Mythos because we're excited, which is how this is changing how we think about managing our employees and what an
and
AI enabled workforce really is looking like. And we really, my what I've been telling people when I go into talks is, you can really look at how we're working and how software developers are working and extrapolate to to a reasonable understanding of how everyone else is going to be working. I think
oh
the
yeah,
best
yeah,
way to
we
see that through that lens is co-work, and
live
we're
in the
watching
future,
that happen
right?
real
We've said
time
that.
through cloud co-work. Yeah. So
And
coders are living in the future. What is that like, Andy, on a management side?
well, I think so. Just we could tell a little story like of all right. If you go back 5 years, how did software development teams work? And for me, it was really like there was this innovation in the early aughts where we transitioned from these big software teams doing what was called a waterfall methodology, which would basically have 9 months or a year of specification building. And then the software team would take that spec, hand it out to hundreds of engineers. They would work for a year or two, and then they would deliver a finished product at the end. And that's very expensive and it's very risky because often that spec is incomplete because you're just imagining how things will come together, but you don't actually know. And so more often than not, you
Doesn't
would see
handle new
like,
requirements
yeah,
well.
you
Right.
get to the end and they would be like, actually, you know what? We're halfway done. Pay us again. And so that's how projects would double and triple in size. And so there was this innovation of this agile methodology or sprint based, or they had a lot of names. And I've been to so many trainings about how to do agile, how to do lean. And every time I tell someone how to do it, they're like, you're doing it wrong. But the take
Everyone
home
had
for
their own
me
flavor.
is,
Right.
yeah, there are a lot of flavors, but some of the core
At Adobe, we
concepts
had
were
Scrum, and
that you had different roles in your team. So you'd have a product owner, someone who really understood what the vision for the product is. You'd have like a lead developer who would help break down tasks for the team. You have a backlog, and these should be little tasks, like 1 or 2 day long pieces of effort. And then developers would be assigned tasks from the backlog. It would be broken into 2 week periods of work called a sprint. I think the nomenclature came from the game rugby originally.
the idea, like broadly, this really was a positive improvement in how we build
Oh, it
software,
definitely
because
was because
what it gave us is it basically acknowledged that the biggest thing is there was this agile manifesto. One of the things in the agile manifesto was that change is a normal part of building software, and instead of
yeah,
trying to design things so well that you couldn't possibly find anything that could create change in your software, which is impossible, let's acknowledge this, and every 2 weeks let's pause, look at what we're
yeah,
building, ask what have we learned and how has that changed the trajectory of what we're building, so that when we get nearer to the deadline, we have pushed the lower value work down, and we've
right.
really focused on the things that we've discovered. And one of the things, we built, I don't know, over 100 software products at this point,
Oh
is,
yeah.
and I don't think any single one of them has launched in a way that was a direct copy of what we thought we were building in the beginning. So we've had some that were closer, but some are completely different, and
Yeah.
all of them have changed over the course of software. And what
Well, yeah,
Agile does
because
is gives us a system for managing that. And we almost always, I think, we may hit our deadlines roughly 98% of the time unless time we worked at it, because
well,
Agile has
another
allowed
reason you
us
can
to
do that
adopt
is because
things.
you're always shipping. And so
Yeah.
every 2 weeks you have a shippable product. And so when you get close to a deadline, you're like, all right, we have this product and we've done the most important things first. But the whole system was designed around the understanding that doing the coding was the hard part. And
Mhm.
so much was the focus on the coding that the other work that went with this, like the breaking down the tasks and thinking about how does this vision from a product owner translate into the specific technical requirements, like how are we going to do that? And also architecture of the system would be like a one-time thing. You might have an architect who come in like in their three-piece suit and they're like swaggering around and they would hand to you like, this is how the system will
The
work.
architect,
And then they would go
and then
away because
disappear.
you don't need an
Yeah.
architect for the next 2 years because like, all right, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
The now in the age of we're not agile, we're AI Joel.
Nope. You're not going to make it happen. I
It,
don't
it
think.
looks
But
better. It
okay.
looks when you write it out. You write agile and move the A over the I over next to the A. See AI goal. A. All right, fine.
AI
Let's leave it.
AI
The code
enabled
AI enabled. So
develop.
the coding is no longer the hard big piece. And so all of those pieces that in Scrum were designed to facilitate your developers being able to take their little piece of the world and execute, that you can't structure your work that anymore because essentially all that little thing can be done through an AI enabled developer in a matter of minutes now. And
Yeah.
so their 2-week sprint worth of work they can get done with in a day.
Yeah. And
So
this gets the feedback we're getting from Beth, who's one of our PMs, is she was just casually offhand mentioned to me the other day that her problem has switched from managing the engineers workflow to trying to keep the engineers fed
yeah,
because the task, the work, the writing code is compressed, which means we now need to feed more coal in terms of tasks into the development engine because the developers are working so much faster and it's stressing the rest of the infrastructure. And then from a
yeah.
finance side in our company,
Mm-hmm.
that means I have underutilized engineers, right? Because my
Yeah.
job on the sales and finance side is to keep my people busy so that we can continue to grow and earn money. And I
But
can't, and to some degree, if an engineer is sitting 20% utilized because they're so much faster and they don't have tasks to work on, I'm still paying them. And yes, I here at Modern Logic, we give time back. Go on a walk, go take PTO, go take unpaid time off. But there's only so much that you can do before how
also
to
the
use these
role
people
is
effectively.
changing.
Yeah.
You can't just sit static in the chairs you were in 5 years ago. Yeah, the bottleneck now is between sales and interpreting those product needs into what do we actually build. The architect
Yeah.
doesn't come in once every 2 years now. The architect basically is everybody because everyone is doing larger pieces of the work. And so I see a blending where engineers need to understand the product better. So that product ownership role is distributed across the team. But also, we now have a new communication bandwidth we didn't need before, which is individual engineers are making decisions about how the product should work. They now are responsible for communicating back up the chain. This is how we decided it would work. Because actually, this is how I had decided it should work. So the test plans, the documentation that goes back to the client, that now can't stop at the product owner level. That is coming from the bottom up, which
Yeah.
now it happens much faster. So you might need more iteration with the client because they maybe didn't agree to those changes because it's moving so fast now. So you
And
can almost
this is
show
out
them
of
a
left field.
completed, yeah,
It's a bit out of left field, but if you remember, that was the way we worked at Adobe, where the developers had enormous ownership of the features that they worked on.
well,
And
we were on Shadowland, right? It was totally an unknown. I don't
right,
think
and
most experience that Adobe developers have was that way, but we did.
was that way. But yeah, we were working on basically the first new product I think they'd come out in a decade, and it was very much there was a pirate flag, and it was modeled
Yeah.
after the Mac stuff. And we were when I came in, it was very much R&D, but even up to Lightroom 3, which was a wildly successful product.
Yeah. But each engineer
And,
had a feature area and they drove it.
and I remember like you owned the web module and you were largely, they would come to us and they said, what features do you want to work on? And it was a conversation with, at the time it was Tom and a few the product infrastructure. And he would go and interview customers and say, okay, here's the big things I know it needs to do.
Yeah.
And then in the gaps, we would do the rest. And we'd be like, okay, but we also need to make it much faster. We also know this thing that was half done. We can get it in. Troy would just who was the lead on the project, would randomly show up on a Monday with a whole new feature that he coded over the weekend because he wanted to, because it was just
Yeah.
something he was thinking about. And so I think what we're going to see is if you have creative, high value team members, they're going to be bringing that creativity. But the problem with that too is creativity also needs to be managed so it doesn't blow the deadline, so that it doesn't, so that you're not building features no one needs that overcomplicate the project. Because all of us have used like Word, where there's 3 layers of bars that you have to click through to find
I have
anything, and
no idea how
you
Word
know,
got to be the way it is, but yeah.
and that's what happens if you let every single person contribute every single feature idea of the product. And we're entering a world where the cost of developing a feature that you had as a harebrained idea is driving down to what, 5% of what it used to be,
Well, the
less,
cost is
you know?
not the writing the code. The cost is all the other things. Defining the feature, testing the feature, documenting the feature, taking our implementation back to the original client and saying, is this actually what you wanted? Does this solve the original problem? Did we understand the problem? Because we're
Right.
software people. We're not farmers. We're not architects. We're not pilots, whatever the domain that we're going into is. So we are doing our best to learn as quickly as we can what those problems are. But often they'll be like, no, I can't do it this way. Or you forgot, you assumed there'd be one thing here associated with thing, but actually it could be 1,000. All right. This isn't just an enter text field here. You need to pick from the library. And we'd be like, what library? So those are the areas where we have to work, is that understanding the product, building, communicating, testing, documenting, all of that workflow. And it doesn't fit into that 2-week sprint as it was anymore. It's no longer
Right.
broken down into little tasks where they're much larger, less well-defined tasks. And there's this huge overlap between the card that says what we need to do and actually the prompt that the engineer then feeds in to have the AI do it. And so if I'm writing cards and that's the same as the prompt, do we need that as 2 steps? We're still figuring that ourselves. We started saying, let's put the prompt in the card. So like, we're not just typing it twice. It's figuring out how that responsibility is changing. That's the
And
new challenge.
if I had to guess, right, I would guess that because the cost of software is going down, one of the things that we're going to see, and we're already seeing this here, we just had a great sales meeting this week where we built code for the sales meeting. It just one off, and then don't need it and delete it, discard it. Don't need it. And
Yeah.
I think what we're going to see is the engineers that are working on these more proactive, sort of forward thinking features faster. The ones that really succeed are going to be the ones that say, okay, I built a demo of this so I can show you what I was thinking, as opposed to us before, to get a feature that you had on a product, you would propose it. It would go to the project manager. It would get added as a card. It would go into the backlog. It would get prioritized, and you might see it in 2 weeks. You might see it in a month. And now we're going to be at the point where engineers really have to take ownership of communicating what they've built to the entire organization. And
Yeah.
but we have come up, the ability to show rather than tell has dramatically expanded in the last 3 months. So I think we could live in a very cool world where one of the things we can do on the sales side, and I always think from a sales lens, is we can show you what we mean when we're going to build something for you. And yeah, maybe it's not all there, but it's fast enough for us to rig a demo that it takes about as much time to do that as it did to do the R&D we did before. And so I think if you have, if you, every person on your team is going to become a mini product owner, is going to be a feature lead, right? What we call feature leads at Adobe, right? Like the idea is everyone's going to be a subject matter expert of a piece of the product they're working on. And then ideally they would then be using the tools that we now have available to show the rest of the team what they mean when
Yeah.
they're saying, this is my vision for where this could go. And I think the people that are just the grinders, that are just they show up at 8 a.m. and they start eating cards and fixing bugs and so on, the role for those are going to get dramatically reduced,
I
right?
think if you're that's the kind of work you do today, I think you need to really take a close look at yourself and think, all right, am I willing to take on those additional communication requirements that this role is going to have in the future? Because I can't just sit in isolation and just code. I have to not only produce code, and you're going to use AI to help with that, You have to communicate what decisions were made back up to the team. And
And
also
take deeper ownership, deeper understanding
Mhm.
of what features mean and why you're building them. And in large software projects, you could basically live being a subject matter expert on a very narrow band of knowledge, and that band is expanding. You're going to have to know more about why the product's going to be built. You're going to have
Yeah.
to take on more product ownership and communication. And
Another
so
thought I
the other
had
thing is
is,
developers that like living in their basement and not talking to humans. That has been an increasing problem
well,
for a long time. This is just going to accelerate that, right?
and we've also, there's this tension, I think, between like product managers and developers in terms of who's going to be the one who keeps their job, right? Because product
Yeah.
managers are going to Claude Code and getting stuff written and be like, look, why do we need developers? I can do this. And developers are like, look, I can talk to the client and turn it into, why do we need project managers? And I think the truth is we still need both, but their roles are gonna blend
Blur.
together, because
Yeah.
part of being successful in developing code for a project, and I'm sure this will apply to doing work of other kinds, is learning how to use the AI tools correctly. It's not just one prompt that's one sentence. It's learning how to write good prompts and how to create skills and other context accessories so that the AI knows what it needs to know when it needs to know it.
Right.
And so you might have people on your team who are actually more like the skill builders and making sure that the tooling and infrastructure, so when other people use AI on that project, it gets correct results. Like it always runs the unit tests, it always runs other checks on the code quality tools that we have. It could even run the app, build it, make sure it looks correct, click all the buttons, make sure they all work. All of that can be automated through AI with skills and other CI/CD infrastructure and so forth. That wouldn't allow someone who used to be a project manager to be a coder with AI coding assistants and actually do good work, because all of that supporting infrastructure would help them do that. So that's how those two current roles, the coder who just likes to be in their box and the project manager who doesn't know how to code, becomes actually both contributing changes and
Right.
collaborating, and they're both still needed.
Yeah, I think there will just be less for the people that don't want to be see on those borders. And let's step back for a moment and talk about. We spent a lot of time talking about development. So, how does this impact other parts of the workforce? Because I think our conjecture is that we can extrapolate from this to everything
Yeah,
else.
I
So,
just imagine any place where you are just an order taker, draw a logo. Okay, I think that won't be sufficient in the future. You have to understand, why do they need a logo? What business problem are we solving by having a new logo? What other visual things go with this logo? So one person, instead of just spending a day drawing a logo, may now produce an entire new design book of things that go along with this, the colors, the whatever,
this is your brand
and
identity.
communicating the presentation that goes back to the client around, here's what it was, the whole why we were thinking this would work. Or instead of drawing one logo, you produce 10 or 100, or you work with user testing. And actually, we actually showed these logos to 1,000 people, and these were the 10. All of those are things that used to be jobs done by a whole bunch of people. In the age of AI, I think you'll start to see that we're able to do all of that with fewer people, which means we'll be doing it more often, which means everyone is responsible for doing all that. The table stakes are just raised. Like
And I
you've
think
got to do all of this.
the other thing is your senior role now is going to move from the people that work on the hardest thing to the people that understand how to when you're for your example, they're building a brand system for a company, including the logo. They understand that part of their job as they do that is to teach the AI for the next time a new
Mhm.
brand system comes in. They're going to have the
Yeah.
idea of how do I build the skills? How do what pieces of
Yep.
this can AI handle? How do I prompt so that the next time I deliver for client number two, or I do this a second time or a third time, that the AI is doing more and more of that lift. And I think that's the new
Or
senior skill in the world.
sure. Or even one of the deliverables is not just here's the design system, but here's actually the skills and prompts, so that when you want to create a new business letter using, say, Gemini or something, it just does it correctly.
Yeah.
It's like the templates of yesteryear or the mail merge of yesteryear. But now it creates an email with your branding in your voice that speaks to the customer and it's all like spot on.
And I think that's a really interesting point, really valuable point, because a lot of what we're doing now, in addition to the software we're writing, when we look at some of the new projects we've taken, there's a lot of, and here's how you convince the AI or get the AI to do this thing over and over again for you. And in a way, it's like, I tell people it's stepping back, because we're used to diving into these sophisticated, complex things that sometimes they take days to just even understand what they're doing, even if we
Mhm.
were the ones that coded them, because they're so complex. To, okay, I started today and I just had a conversation with my AI in plain text. I open up a plain text markdown file in plain text, and I read what the
Yeah.
system does. And instead of code executing, you have the AI executing. And half of our projects are still code. And then the other half of that same project is English words that make the code do the thing that we need it to do, whether that be classifying or moving files around or whatnot. And so even us in our consulting, it's become very much, let's build the skills and tools that the AI can then use to execute. So it's almost like we're educating your AI employee or your AI agents, which is what they really are, on how to continue to execute this software in the
You know,
future. And more software is moving into that level of the compute stack and away from the metal side of the compute stack, which has been really
another thing
fast. I
that
wonder where
I,
we'll get when these
I'm
things get more accurate.
one thing I was just thinking I'm excited about is there's a lot of software that's written that isn't reusable. They
Yeah,
aren't operating system components that every iPhone has this. They're just one-off things. And some people are always like, you need to document your code. And I've always been like, code documentation just isn't valuable because it ends up
code is
saying
self-documenting if it's
the
well
code should
written.
be self-documenting, or the code is in a comment, which in source code, the compiler ignores. So you could put anything you want in there. In fact, funny story, I once was looking at some code when I was at Adobe, and I found like my order for takeout just in a code comment in one of the files because I was on the phone and I needed some place to write it down. I just put it in a code comment and then
And it
forgot
got
it was
checked
there.
in.
It got checked in, and like
Uh,
years later, I found out, oh, yeah, that sounds good. We should order that again. But anyway, that's an example of what code comments, they don't stay current. They rot and they actually then become misleading
yeah,
or useless. But what I'm finding is because context is so important for AI and the number of tokens you feed it is proportional to how much you spend on it, having concise context is really valuable. And that's what code documentation is. And actually, the skill of taking like this verbose self-documenting code, yeah, it's self-documenting, but it's thousands of lines. But if you had a 20-line summary of that in a README file, that would be really useful. And actually, AI is really good at producing that. And it's really important for AI to have that to consume it. But it helps us people too, because now, oh, I get it. This set of files here is supposed to do this one thing.
right.
Let's let it stay there and be isolated and modular and not put other things in there. Other thing doesn't belong here. That other thing belongs somewhere else. So
But then you take a few steps further down that path, and then, like I am with my productivity system and my daily agentic harness that I've built for my Mac, you end up with, okay, I don't need the code at all. I just need the words, because there are
yeah.
certain use cases for which the words are enough to accomplish
Mhm.
what we used to. And this is something Andy and I talked about. You and I talked about a few days ago. Like, it used to be that if you had an idea, let's say you wanted to make a game, the space between you starting that project and seeing a fun thing that you could play with and use as a concept to say, this is what I meant, was a month, 2 months, 3 months. Now
Mhm.
you literally don't have to write any code, and you can show people you just tell the AI to build the thing, and it might not get it right, but it gets it right enough
Sure.
times.
And that's super
And
valuable for
eventually that
play.
enough for some workflows means that we don't have to write code at all, and we have software, if you will, being
Okay.
executed by cowork on our desktops.
Yes,
So
and
it'll be
Anthropic would love that because every time you do it, you're paying for tokens. I'll do the flip side,
tokens.
which is it, that's
Yeah,
all fine until you start saying, I have a million row data set and I need to feed each of those rows through this algorithm. If
right.
that algorithm is send it to Anthropic, it'll be slow and incredibly expensive. If the
Yep.
solution is I'll use Anthropic to code a traditionally written software tool to process those rows, that's the sweet spot. And that's where we are today. That's how it should be
Yep.
done. In some cases, you have to go to the language model because you want to do things that just can't be done any other way.
You need the
And in that case,
intelligence, right?
you need the intelligence. You're going to be careful, judicious. You're going to cache results. You're not going to rerun the same inputs over and over.
But I think you
But
start with a prototype where it's
yeah.
just raw. And what I've
Oh, yeah.
done in the systems I've built is then I go back and I say, okay, what pieces of this don't require an LLM? Let's build Python scripts that can execute
Yeah.
each element in order to save
And
the tokens. And then there's another level where you're like, okay, which parts of these LLM scripts can be done by a cheaper model? And that's where I
Yeah.
think you and I
And that's part of what I meant by
teams
the
like
skill
ours can
building.
really nerd out.
This is what I meant by skill building. There's a lot of nerdy thinking and geeky stuff in there for the developer mindset type to work on in that problem space.
Yeah.
And once those skills are built, then the rest of the team, they can just do the thing, and it's efficient, it's correct, it's fast. Yeah.
It runs. Yeah. And then I think there are teams like ours, as AI adoption becomes more sophisticated, we'll be doing more of that sophisticated, breaking these sort of big text blobs, context blobs, and blobs of intent, if you will, down into actual layered software systems, which is exactly what we know how to do, right? It's just we have this new layer in the software system. It's like having a new set of new UI layer where a new architectural layer that you can get your demo done in a few days. And yeah, there's probably still a few months of work there to pare it down and get it actually affordable, but you can get to your POC, your proof of concept, much, much quicker, which is the lean way, the agile way, if you will, of doing things. AI is making agile look slow. That's
Agile
what we're
is
seeing
slow.
here.
Yeah.
All right,
Especially
we're coming up
when,
we're on time, so we should wrap.
So we'll have to save some of those thoughts for next time. But great conversation as always. It's fun. Hey, thanks for joining us. If you have questions or you need AI technology help, you can find me and Dustin. We'd be happy to talk to you. Just hop on over to modernlogic.io. Follow us on our other platforms for this podcast. That includes Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Our show is produced and edited by Ryan Peterson with the assistance of Mark Klipp, and additional contributions by Dylan Brusnek, Anna Spitz, and Beth Davis. Our AI mascot was created by the artist Becca Ron. Our theme music is Elastic Vibe by Ziv Moran. Do you have a question or suggestion we can discuss? It could be the topic of our next show. That's easy. Just get in touch with us at modernlogic.io/podcast. Modern Logic for Your Business is a production of Modern Logic. If you like the show, please remember to rate, share, and review it. It really does make a difference to us.